Picture this, it's the fall of 2018, and the traditional art world just experienced a seismic shock that literally left critics and wealthy buyers completely speechless. A portrait, titled Edmond de Bellamy, went up for auction at the prestigious Christie's auction house in New York. Now, it looked like a classic painting, a little blurry and mysterious, and it ended up selling for an absolutely astonishing $432,500. But here's the kicker. The artist who painted it, they had no pulse, no childhood memories, and zero emotional depth, because it was generated entirely by artificial intelligence. Welcome to AI Explained Simply. Today, we're exploring a profoundly unsettling mystery that impacts all of us, students, teachers, professionals, you name it. We're going to find out why, despite the mind-blowing advancements in technology we see every day, artificial intelligence will never truly be creative like a human being. So let's dive into this question that's fundamentally challenging our understanding of art, ingenuity, and honestly, what it even means to be human. Can a machine actually be creative? Right now, we're surrounded by generative AI tools that can instantly compose a piano melody, paint a breathtaking landscape, or write a short story in mere seconds. To a complete beginner, it looks like pure magic. To a professional artist, well, it might look like a massive threat. But to answer this question accurately, we need to strip away the hype and look at the fundamental architecture of both the human mind and the machine. Stick around, because understanding the difference between the two is going to completely change how you view the art you consume and the technology you use every single day.
All right, Section 1, the spark of imagination.
To tackle this grand question, we first have to agree on what creativity actually means. We throw that word around a lot, right? We connect it to beautiful symphonies and clever business solutions alike. But strictly speaking, creativity is the ability to generate novel and valuable ideas or works through the exercise of imagination. Psychologists generally agree on what's known as the standard definition. For something to be considered truly creative, it has to meet two strict conditions. First, it must be entirely new or original. But novelty alone isn't enough. I mean, if I just randomly mash my keyboard and produce a string of gibberish, that's technically new, but it's completely useless. So the second condition is that the creation must be somehow valuable, useful, or effective to society. It has to solve a problem, evoke a genuine emotion, or clarify something that was previously vague.
It's fascinating because our concept of creativity has evolved so much over time. Back in ancient Greece and ancient China, people didn't really believe humans could create anything on their own. Art was seen as a form of divine discovery, something handed down by the gods or muses. It wasn't until the Renaissance that the modern idea of the human genius really took off, celebrating individual human effort. Then, moving into the 19th century, sparked by Darwinian theories, we began to view creativity as a deeply embedded evolutionary trait. It evolved as an adaptive mechanism that allowed our ancestors to solve incredible problems and survive in rapidly changing environments.
Moving right along to Section 2, the human creative process.
Human imagination doesn't just happen in a vacuum. It is a messy, biological, and deeply psychological struggle. When a great inventor discovers a new mechanism or a musician writes a heart-wrenching ballad, they're engaging in a complex internal journey. Back in the early 20th century, the theorist Graham Wallas mapped out this organic process into 4 stages. First is preparation, where you gather information and study the problem. Next is incubation. This is where the idea just stews in your subconscious, like when you're taking a shower or going for a walk. Third is intimation, that gut feeling that a solution is bubbling up right before the explosive aha moment. And finally, verification, where you test your idea against reality to see if it holds up. This is a lived, struggling process of sketching, revising, and wrestling with your own thoughts and doubts.
Now look at this staggering number, 38%. Our creative output is heavily influenced by our state of mind. In a famous 1989 study, clinical psychologist K. Redfield Jamison found that 38% of a sample of highly prominent authors had a history of mood disorders. Throughout history, great artists, musicians, and writers have often faced incredible adversity. There's a deeply documented link between emotional extremes, profound suffering, and the drive to create something meaningful.
So the takeaway here is that human creativity is inextricably linked to our psychology, our suffering, and our conscious lived experiences. The drive to create grows naturally right out of childhood pretend play, and as we grow up, our art becomes driven by visceral, real-world experiences, things like profound love, bitter failure, and incredible sacrifice. The eminent psychiatrist Anthony Storr argued that the creative process often acts as a repair mechanism for psychological trauma. It literally protects the individual against depression and helps us regain a sense of mastery over our unpredictable lives. Creativity is, at its absolute core, how we survive, heal, and understand the human condition.
Which brings us to Section 3. Enter computational creativity.
Now, let's contrast that deeply human emotional struggle with the synthetic, mathematical world of machine learning. We are living in an era where AI models can produce breathtaking visuals and complex texts that look exactly like human art. Supporters of AI creativity point to these stunning outputs as proof that machines have finally achieved imagination. But how does it work? Generative AI creates images, music, stories, and videos by using deep artificial neural networks to learn massive patterns from input data. By adjusting mathematical weights and programmed heuristics based on the millions of images or books it was trained on, the AI enables the non-linear generation of creative artifacts. But it is vital to understand this. It doesn't feel an emotion when it does this. It doesn't draw from a well of personal suffering or joy. It calculates statistical probabilities to essentially learn how to mimic our human innovation perfectly.
Let me share a wild and vivid example of this. A developer named Ross Goodwin hooked up an AI language model to a camera, a microphone, and a GPS, and literally took it on a massive road trip. The AI, which was trained on classical literature, processed all this sensory data to write an entire novel called One the Road, obviously a nod to Jack Kerouac's classic book. The journalist Brian Merchant beautifully described the AI's output as pixelated poetry in its ragtag assemblage of modern American imagery. It proved that AI can mimic the output of creativity incredibly well through what engineers actually call hallucinations. The AI doesn't understand the open road. It's just probabilistically generating words, creating bizarre and sometimes poetic mistakes.
Let's look at Section 4, Recombination versus True Inspiration.
The absolute crucial point we have to untangle here is the distinct difference between a machine mathematically recombining old data and a human being experiencing genuine inspiration. A great deal of what we call AI art is actually just a form of combinatorial creativity. This is the act of blending superficially different pre-existing objects or genres together. Think about it. If you prompt an AI to create an image of a robot cowboy in the Wild West, it's just combining visual data points of robots and cowboys from its training data. It's recombining what already exists. Conversely, human originality requires a causal process of independent discovery. Even if two scientists independently discover the exact same mathematical formula, it's creative because it wasn't copied from a database. It was born from an independent, causal mental leap. Philosophers actually divide this entire debate into two distinct camps: weak artificial creativity versus strong artificial creativity. Weak AC asks, can a computer behave as if it is creative? We absolutely know the answer to that is yes. An AI composing a symphony or painting a portrait is putting on a highly convincing performance. But strong AC asks a much deeper question. Does the computer actually possess creative cognitive states? Is the machine actively thinking and feeling the music? Or is it just simulating creativity to fool the human observer?
Section 5, the Lovelace Objection. To solve this mystery and figure out if true artificial creativity is even possible, we need to rewind to a massive turning point in the year 1843. Long before modern computers even existed, the philosophical battle lines were already being drawn. Ada Lovelace, a brilliant mathematician working on one of the earliest mechanical computers called the analytical engine, presented what is now a classic argument. She famously stated, "The analytical engine has no pretensions whatever to originate anything. It can do whatever we know how to order it to perform." Lovelace argued that a machine cannot originate anything. It only transforms data through well-defined algorithms programmed by humans. It completely lacks the spark of spontaneity. This leads us to a pretty profound thought experiment. If a machine only does what it's programmed to do, how can its behavior ever truly be called creative? Is a computer responsible for its art, or is it just mathematically shuffling our shared human history? Even with today's wildly advanced deep learning models that generate seemingly spontaneous and unexpected results, they're still fundamentally operating on the strict parameters, weights, and massive datasets provided by their human engineers. The machine itself is entirely blind to the meaning of its own output.
And that brings us to Section 6, the final frontier, agency.
This is really the ultimate synthesis of our explainer today and what experts consider the core, unbridgeable difference between us and the machine: agency. Some tech optimists believe that one day artificial general intelligence, or AGI, will cross this barrier. But let's look at why that might be fundamentally impossible without a human soul. True creativity requires a conscious agent. It requires someone who possesses intention, makes morally responsible choices, and quite frankly, gives a damn about the outcome. Because AI models lack consciousness and intention. They cannot make the moral and emotional choices that define the greatest human narratives and masterpieces. An AI doesn't know what it feels like to have a broken heart. It doesn't fear death, or know what it means to sacrifice for a friend.
When an AI generates a beautiful image of a crying child, it doesn't feel empathy. It has no stakes in the game. It is literally just predicting pixel colors on a screen. When you compare the human creator directly with the AI model side by side like this, the reality becomes undeniably stark. For humans, motivation is an emotional necessity deeply tied to our survival. For AI, motivation is just a set of programmed heuristics. The source of our art is lived, conscious experience, whereas the AI relies entirely on scraped training datasets. But most importantly, a human creator bears the praise or the blame for their work. The praise or blame for a stunning piece of AI art ultimately belongs to the engineers and the vast collective of human artists who created the training data, not the algorithms themselves.
This brings us right back to Anthony Storr's powerful observation about the creative process, protecting the individual from despair. What ordinary people really need to understand in the age of AI is this: our imagination remains fundamentally unique because it's born from our flesh and blood drive to heal, to connect, and to express the shared human condition. Creating from experience is vastly different than creating from data. Even if future AGI becomes incredibly powerful, without lived experiences, it will always be simulating life rather than actually experiencing it.
So, to wrap things up, I'm going to leave you with this provocative thought. As society increasingly relies on algorithms to write our emails, design our graphics, and compose our music, will we lose the human experiments of life that fuel true creativity? The philosopher John Stuart Mill famously warned about losing the diversity of human exploration. In the age of AI, we absolutely must protect the messy, risky, emotional experiences that make our human creativity impossible to truly replicate. The machines can calculate the patterns of our past, but only we can feel the inspiration to forge the future. Thank you for learning with us today on AI Explained Simply. Keep exploring, keep creating, and whatever you do, never lose your human spark.